the life of a park ranger. Being a park ranger isn't just a job, it's a way of life, and one that's filled with unpredictability. Every day brings a new challenge, whether it's helping lost hikers, dealing with wildlife, or simply maintaining the vast, untamed wilderness. As a ranger, you're often alone, miles away from civilization, and faced with situations that many people can't even begin to imagine. But sometimes, it's not just nature you have to worry about, it's something far more unsettling. I've spent years working in some of the most remote and eerie locations across the country, and I've encountered some strange and terrifying situations. There are things out there in the wilderness that just don't make sense, things that can't be explained away by reason or logic. In this video, I'll be sharing with you 4 true, creepy park ranger stories that will give you a glimpse into the darker side of working in the wild. These are experiences that have stayed with me, moments that tested my training, my sanity, and even my very sense of reality. Some of them might just leave you questioning what's out there, lurking in the shadows of our national parks. So, grab a seat and prepare yourself for a journey into the unknown. These are stories that will chill you to the bone. First story, the bizarre attack. It was 2017, and I had just been stationed at Kings Canyon National Park. After a long day of patrols, I was ready to call it a night. My cabin at Grant Grove was quiet, the kind of stillness that only a remote park could offer. I had just changed into my sleep clothes when I heard something outside, a voice. At first, I thought it was nothing, just the wind or the usual noises of the night. But as the voices grew louder, I realized something was off. They didn't sound calm or casual. No, these voices were desperate, high-pitched, and full of panic. I strained to listen, my heart beginning to race. Seconds later, there was a frantic knocking on my door. I jumped up, still in my sweatpants and t-shirt, grabbed my flashlight, and rushed to open it. There, standing in front of me, were 2 young women, looking pale and terrified. One of them was holding her shoulder, and blood was soaking through her jacket. She winced as she gasped for breath, clearly in shock. Without wasting a second, I ushered them inside and flicked on the light. As the woman with the bloody shoulder collapsed onto the floor, her friend knelt beside her, trying to comfort her. I could see the bite wound immediately. It wasn't just any bite. It was deep, and the shape was all wrong. It didn't look like the kind of bite an animal would leave behind. "What happened?" I asked, my voice steady despite the growing sense of dread creeping into my gut. The woman with the wound explained between labored breaths. She and her friend had been walking along a trail when they heard someone following them. Thinking it was another hiker, they turned around to check. What they saw, though, was nothing they could have ever expected. A naked man came running at them, tackled one of them, and sank his teeth into her shoulder. The woman screamed, but the man didn't let go until her friend kicked him square in the balls. He rolled off in pain, but after a few seconds, he got up and started running after them again, naked and enraged. I called my coworker Tom to come over immediately. He arrived in minutes, his face reflecting the same disbelief I was feeling. After seeing the bite pattern, he knew this wasn't an animal attack. We needed to find this guy, and fast. I told Tom to stay with the women and keep them safe, in case the attacker returned. I grabbed my gear, checked my pistol, and stepped outside into the cold, dark night. I wasn't sure what I was walking into, but I knew those women needed help. My mind was clear despite the chaos of the situation. I was trained for moments like this, even if I'd never faced something so insane. The woods around me were eerily quiet as I slowly moved forward, flashlight in hand, scanning the shadows. I kept my pistol low, but ready. Every noise, every rustle made my heart race. I had no idea who or what I was looking for, but I had to find him. As I moved deeper into the trees, I heard something, a rustle in the underbrush. I swung my light toward the sound, but saw nothing. I took another step, my grip tightening on the gun. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. Pale skin moving between the trees. It was him. The man was fast, too fast. He wasn't running toward me, he was circling, moving like a predator, sizing me up. I shouted at him to stop, but he just kept running, darting in and out of the shadows. My flashlight bounced in my hand as I tried to keep it on him. I wasn't going to lose sight of him again. But then, I lost him. For a moment, there was nothing. And then, Before I could react, he was on me. His body slammed into mine, knocking me to the ground. My flashlight flew from my hand, and I could feel his hands, strong and cold, grabbing at me, trying to pin me down. I was panicking, but I fought against it, twisting and struggling to get free. I still had my pistol. With all the strength I had left, I twisted my body, pulled my arm free, and fired. The shot rang out in the night, loud and sharp, and the man jerked in pain. His grip loosened, and I scrambled to my feet, grabbing my flashlight and keeping my gun trained on him. He was on the ground, groaning, clutching his stomach. He wasn't moving much now, but I wasn't taking any chances. I stayed there, watching him, my heart pounding, until backup finally arrived. Tom and other rangers arrived quickly. We cuffed the man, careful not to touch his blood, and waited for the paramedics to take over. The woman with the bite wound was treated, stitched up, and given a rabies shot just in case. The attacker was taken away in an ambulance, and I went back to my cabin, hands still shaking. That night tested me in ways I never expected. The quiet of the forest returned, as if nothing had happened, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Whatever we had just dealt with, it wasn't something I could explain, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. Second story, Mike's ghostly past. A few years after that bizarre attack, I met Mike. We were regular drinking buddies, the kind of friends who shared beers and stories about everything under the sun. Sports, work, and life in general. We had those long, easy conversations that could stretch for hours. But there was one thing Mike never wanted to talk about: his past. I didn't think much of it at first. Everyone has their own stories they're not ready to share. But after some time, I started to wonder. Mike had this quiet, almost haunted demeanor whenever I asked about his previous life. He would change the subject quickly, or just flat out shut me down. At first, I figured he just didn't want to revisit those old memories. It wasn't until one night that he finally opened up. We were sitting on the back porch of my house, enjoying a few drinks after a long week. The air was cool, and the conversation was flowing as usual, when Mike suddenly leaned back in his chair and lit a cigarette. "You ever want to hear a ghost story?" he asked, his voice sounding more serious than I'd ever heard it before. I nodded, thinking he was going to tell me some campfire-type tale, but what he shared was far darker than anything I could have imagined. Mike told me that back in 1990, during his final year as a park ranger in the deserts of New Mexico, he had an encounter that changed his life forever. It was the kind of thing you'd expect to hear from an old-time prospector or a grizzled veteran of some wild adventure. But for Mike, it was real. He was patrolling a remote trail near the caverns, a stretch of land that was mostly empty, save for a few other rangers. One afternoon, Mike saw a man limping over a ridge, clearly injured. Concerned, Mike rushed to help, thinking the man had hurt himself on the trail or had been bitten by a snake. As he got closer, though, something felt off. The man wasn't looking at Mike with relief or gratitude. He was staring at him coldly, almost calculatingly. His eyes were vacant, and there was a strange intensity in them, like he wasn't really there. Mike called out to the man, asking if he needed help, but instead of answering, the man pulled a gun from behind his back and pointed it directly at Mike's head. The situation escalated quickly. The man demanded that Mike remove his uniform, and in that moment, Mike realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a random, desperate hiker. The man was trying to steal Mike's ranger identity, likely to escape whatever danger was pursuing him. If Mike gave up his uniform, he would be left helpless, and the man would use it to blend in and avoid capture. Mike, of course, refused. He knew that the second he complied, his life would be in danger. The man insisted, his voice growing more desperate and frantic as he pressed the gun closer to Mike's face. For a few moments, time seemed to slow down as Mike weighed his options. He was trained to handle dangerous situations, but this one felt different. The man was clearly out of his mind, and Mike knew that giving in would mean he wouldn't make it out alive. That's when the situation turned into a fight for survival. Mike managed to wrestle the gun away from the man's grip, but the struggle was intense. They went to the ground, fighting desperately. Mike's heart was racing as he tried to control the situation, but the man fought like a cornered animal, and Mike realized he was stronger than he had first thought. In the chaos, Mike did what he had to do to defend himself. He grabbed the man's face and began to suffocate him, forcing his hand over the man's mouth and nose. Mike's mind raced as the man's thrashing grew weaker, but he didn't want to kill him. He just needed to subdue him long enough to escape. It took what felt like an eternity, but eventually the man's body went limp. Mike rolled off of him, panting and shaking. He checked for a pulse. It was faint, but still there. Mike quickly secured the man and radioed for backup. The man was taken to the hospital in critical condition, but he never regained consciousness. The doctors said that he had suffered from a lack of oxygen, and his chances of surviving were slim. Mike knew that, even if the man pulled through, he would never be the same. It was an act of self-defense, but it still haunted Mike. The look in the man's eyes when he realized he couldn't breathe was something Mike couldn't shake. That was the moment Mike's nightmares began. He didn't want to talk about what had happened, but the memories lingered. It wasn't just the physical fight that stayed with him. It was the mental toll of having taken someone's life, even if it was justified. The image of the man's terrified face haunted him in his sleep. Sometimes, Mike would wake up in the middle of the night, feeling like he was being watched. He couldn't shake the feeling that the man's ghost was following him. The nightmares grew worse, and eventually, Mike made the decision to leave his life as a park ranger behind. He moved as far from the desert as he could, taking a job in Michigan, hoping the change of scenery would help him escape the past. But even after the move, the darkness followed him. And that's when I realized that sometimes the things you face in the wilderness aren't just physical challenges. They stay with you, long after the danger is gone. Third story, the burn victim. A few years later, I found myself working at Wind Cave National Park in South Dakota. It's a place with a lot of history, one of the first 6 national parks established by Teddy Roosevelt. And like many of the parks I've worked in, it has its fair share of strange, unsettling moments. But none of those moments ever prepared me for what happened one late afternoon. It was a chilly September day when I received a call about a hiker. A man had been found stumbling out of the woods, severely burned and disoriented. At first, I thought it was a simple case of someone getting too close to a campfire, maybe an accident, but when I saw him, everything changed. He was barely recognizable. His clothes were torn, hanging from his body in shreds, and his skin was raw and blistered, as though he'd been burned alive. His face was swollen, with one eye half shut and the other wide open, bloodshot and full of panic. He was wheezing, struggling to breathe, and when he saw me, he let out this strange sound, half sob, half yelp, before he collapsed to the ground, begging me for help. I didn't know what to make of it. I had seen burns before, but nothing like this. The man didn't smell like the usual campfire smoke. He had the stench of something much worse, like charred meat. I immediately radioed for help, but I knew we wouldn't have much time. As I waited for backup, I kept trying to comfort him, telling him help was on the way. He was barely conscious, his breathing coming in shallow gasps. He muttered something under his breath, something I couldn't fully make out. The only clear words I caught were fire, and I wasn't supposed to be here. But by then, he had already faded in and out of consciousness. It didn't take long for one of my fellow rangers, Tom, to show up on an ATV, bringing a skid with him. We moved the man as carefully as we could, trying to keep him stable while we rushed back to the ranger station. Tom and Ellen, 2 other rangers who were stationed there, helped get him inside, but it was clear he wasn't going to make it. His injuries were too severe. His arms were charred black, and his chest was covered in burns and had been through something horrific, something I couldn't explain. The burns were unlike any I'd seen before, and there was no obvious cause. We had no reports of a fire in the area, and there were no signs of a campsite gone wrong. It was as if he had been exposed to something far more intense than anything nature could cause. Despite our best efforts, the man slipped into unconsciousness. When the air ambulance finally arrived, it was too late. He was gone before they could even get him off the ground. We were left standing in the silence, still processing what had just happened. The burn marks on the table and the lingering smell in the air were all we had to remember him by. There was nothing to explain it, no answers. The man had simply appeared from the woods, looking like he had been burned alive, and now he was gone. No one knew who he was or how he got those injuries, and no one could explain it. Later, we got a call from a state trooper with the Minnesota State Patrol. They were trying to identify the man, but no records matched. There were no missing persons reports, no family, no leads. The only clue they had was the boots he was wearing. They were old, standard-issue U.S. Park Ranger boots from 1947. The trooper thought it was odd, and we all did. Who was this man? What happened to him? No one knew, and the mystery only deepened when they ran tests on the burns. There was no indication that they had been caused by a campfire, gasoline, or any other conventional means. It was as if something else had caused the burns, something beyond our understanding. As the investigation came to a close, the man was buried in a county cemetery as just another unidentified John Doe. The case was closed, but the questions lingered. Who was he? Where did he come from? What happened to him in those woods? I tried to put it out of my mind, but it wasn't easy. That night, after the man had been taken away, I kept thinking about him. The way he looked, the way he sounded when he begged for help. I couldn't shake the image of him stumbling through the trees, a living ghost. Over the next few weeks, the story started to fade from our conversations, but the memory never left me. Then one day, something strange happened. A caver found something deep in the park, a single hiking boot, buried in clay. It was the same size as the burn victim's boots. There was no other trace of him, no signs of blood or anything else. Just that one boot, buried deep in the earth. The park moved on, as it always does. But for me, the questions never went away. There were too many unanswered things, too many eerie details that didn't make sense. I couldn't stop thinking about the man, about what had really happened to him. And even now, as I walk through the park, I can't help but wonder if he's still out there, waiting to be found, or if something even darker lurks in the shadows of those woods. Fourth story, the disappearance in Wind Cave. It was another normal day at Wind Cave National Park, but things quickly took a strange turn. I had been working there for several years, and I thought I had seen just about everything. But in 2003, a missing hiker case turned into one of the most unsettling experiences of my career. The call came in late in the afternoon. A hiker, who we'll call Hiker F, had reported that his friend, Hiker M, had gone missing in the Wind Cave system after following a child into one of the tunnels. I couldn't believe what I was hearing at first. A child? There hadn't been any reports of a missing child. And what in the world could a child be doing in the cave system alone? As the dispatcher briefed me on the situation, I learned that Hiker F and his friend had been hiking near Lookout Point when they saw a lone child running toward the entrance of Wind Cave. It was an unusual place for a child to be running around, especially without any adults. Concerned for the child's safety, Hiker F and Hiker M decided to follow him. But when they reached the entrance, the child crawled into a narrow tunnel, and Hiker M went in after him, promising to return shortly. Hiker F waited for some time, but when M didn't come back, he grew anxious. Instead of going into the cave after him, Hiker F ran back to the surface and sprinted nearly 2 miles to get a cell signal, where he called 911. By the time I arrived on scene with the search and rescue team, Hiker F was becoming more and more frantic. He kept repeating his story, growing increasingly agitated as he explained that after following the child into the cave, he couldn't find M. And when he went back to look for the child, no one was there. Not the child, not M, just silence. We immediately began a search. Our team of 8 rangers, including 2 caving specialists, geared up to enter the cave. The air was cool and heavy as we moved toward the entrance, and the sound of our boots crunching on the gravel seemed unnervingly loud in the silence of the night. Hiker F was still with us, pacing nervously as we prepared to go inside. Wind Cave is known for its vast and intricate tunnel system, and this search was going to be anything but simple. We squeezed through narrow passages, the air becoming more stifling the deeper we went. The walls were jagged, and every corner seemed to hold more uncertainty. We were moving cautiously, our headlamps cutting through the darkness, trying to follow any clues left behind by Hiker M. We didn't find much at first, just a torn piece of blue fabric caught on a rock, likely from M's jacket, and a few signs that indicated he had been moving deeper into the cave. The deeper we ventured, the more the sense of unease grew. The tunnels started to narrow, forcing us to crawl through tight spaces. The air was becoming more difficult to breathe, and I felt a growing sense of urgency as we pressed forward. Hours passed, and we found more signs of Hiker M, a boot print in the damp clay, a smudge on the wall that could have been a handprint. But still, there was no sign of him. At one point, we reached a chamber known as Calcite Lake, a mysterious and eerie part of the cave. The still water glimmered under our lights, and around the edges we found another boot print, but no body, no sign of Hiker M. By midnight, we had gone as far as we could. Our radios weren't working, and we were running out of options. Exhausted, we made our way back to the surface, promising Hiker F that we would continue the search in the morning. But it was clear that something wasn't right. The longer we spent in the cave, the more I began to wonder if we were looking for something, or someone, that wasn't supposed to be found. The following day, more cavers arrived, including experts from the National Speleological Society, who were some of the best in the country. We split up into groups, each taking a different path in the cave, but still, we found nothing. Not a trace of Hiker M. It was as if he had disappeared without a trace. By day 3, we were deep in unexplored parts of the cave. We crawled through narrow, tight spaces, our movements slow and careful. The search became more and more desperate, but the deeper we went, the more we found ourselves running into dead ends. More empty tunnels, more silence. No M. Then on day 4, we found something that stopped us dead in our tracks. In a narrow chamber barely big enough to kneel in, we discovered deep, frantic scratches on the clay walls. It was clear that someone had been in a panic, trying to claw their way out. We found a shredded glove, likely belonging to Hiker M, but no body, no bones. At that point, the mood shifted. What started as a search for a missing person had turned into something much more ominous. We all knew that M was in the cave somewhere, but how had he gotten so deep? Why wasn't he staying put? Panic was setting in, and we all knew that the longer we searched, the more dangerous it would become. Days passed, and we found more dead ends. No body, just scratches on the wall and a trail that seemed to disappear. Finally, after 7 days, the search was officially called off. We had done everything we could, but despite all our efforts, we couldn't find Hiker M. The mystery of his disappearance lingered in the air, and no one was sure what to make of it. Some of the team believed that Hiker M had panicked and wandered too far, but the conditions in the cave were such that it was hard to believe he would have survived on his own. Others, like me, began to wonder if something else had happened, something that we just couldn't explain. The park continued to operate as usual, but the impact of that search remained with us. For weeks after, I couldn't stop thinking about the eerie quiet of those tunnels, the feeling that we weren't just looking for a missing hiker, but something far darker. Months later, a caver found something deep in the cave, a single boot buried in clay belonging to Hiker M. It was the only trace of him left behind. The mystery remains unsolved to this day. And now, whenever I lead tours through Wind Cave, I make sure to avoid certain parts of the cave, places where I can't shake the feeling that something or someone is still waiting to be found. The lasting impact. After all these years, I've come to realize that being a park ranger isn't just about dealing with the wilds of nature. It's about surviving the unknown, the strange, and the terrifying. The stories I've shared with you tonight are just a few of the unsettling experiences I've had. But they represent something bigger than just isolated incidents. They remind me of the unpredictability of life in the wilderness and the eerie feeling that sometimes nature itself seems to be holding on to secrets that it's not willing to share. I've walked through the forest and caves of countless national parks, and with each step, I've felt a sense of awe and respect for the natural world. But I've also learned that there are things in those wild places, things that can't be explained by reason or science. There are stories like the ones I've told that stay with you, lingering in the back of your mind long after you've left the forest behind. It's those experiences that change you. They make you question what's real and what's not. Sometimes the truth is more terrifying than any fictional horror story. We as park rangers are trained to protect visitors, to maintain safety, and to preserve the beauty of these wild places. But we're also the ones who have to face the things that come out of the darkness, the things that make you doubt your senses, your training, and even your sanity. I've had my fair share of close calls, moments where I felt the weight of the unknown pressing in on me. And while I'm grateful to have been there to help, there's a part of me that wishes I could go back and unsee the things I've witnessed. The man in the cave, the burned victim, the naked attacker, their faces and the fear they carried have stayed with me. They're moments I'll never forget, even if I try to put them out of my mind. The wilderness can be a beautiful, peaceful place, but it can also be dangerous, unpredictable, and even downright terrifying. And if there's one thing I've learned in all my years as a park ranger, it's that you never truly know what's lurking just beyond the trees or hidden deep in the caves. The stories I've shared tonight are proof of that. So next time you find yourself in one of these wild places, remember that nature is more than just trees and animals. It's a world of mystery, and sometimes the darkness hides more than you think. Be aware, be cautious, and always remember that the wild is not as tame as we like to believe. Thanks for listening to these stories, and remember, whether it's a park ranger or a hiker, we're all just visitors in a world that's far older and far stranger than we could ever imagine.